Hello, U.S. history students. So this week we are picking up with the end of the Revolution. We've won our independence. We've gotten a lot of land from Great Britain, and now we have to survive. Okay. And if we were in class, I would ask you this question. The Revolutionary War was only the first act of the drama of revolution. I would ask you, what do you think this means and what it spells out for us in the days ahead? Okay. In the next couple of weeks. And we would discuss that even though the battle is over, even though the war is over, the fighting is not. And we have to defend the freedoms and the rights that we hold dear, the reasons that we fought the revolution in the first place. We have to make sure that they're preserved. And everybody's going to have differing opinions on how the best way to do that is. So there is going to be conflict in the years following the American Revolution as we try to decide exactly what this new country is going to look like and what this new government is going to look like. And we're going to talk today about the first attempt at that with the Articles of Confederation. Okay, we're going to talk about what the Articles of Confederation are, what they do, what they don't do, and why that's a problem. Okay, so after winning their independence from Great Britain, the American colonists turned to the question of how are they going to govern themselves. Now, we make a big deal about democracy in this country, and we like democracy, don't get me wrong. But most Americans did not favor true democracy because they said that gave too much power to the uneducated masses. Okay, so most Americans, if you press them about it, they like the idea of people having a voice, of people having some power, but maybe only those certain people should have power, or only certain people should lead the country. So when we say we like democracy, it gets kind of tricky. We have to qualify it a little bit better. What we want instead is what we call a republic. And I'm sorry it got cut off there at the bottom, but we favor a republic. And a republic is a government in which the people elect capable leaders to govern. Okay? So the people have a degree of power in that they can choose their leaders, but those leaders have to prove themselves capable. Okay, we don't want one of these members of the uneducated masses to become a leader. Okay, so the people have a degree of power, but when it comes to leadership, it's one of these capable people that's going to run the country. Okay, or capable, or many capable people that are going to run the country. Okay. In the years following the revolution, each state created its own constitution. Okay, so we are comfortable with the idea of a constitution. Each state is going to have its own constitution following the American Revolution. All a constitution is a written system of laws and principles that spell out how your government is going to work. Okay, how it is going to function, what it can do, what it can't do, what are the limits to it. A constitution just spells out how a government is going to work. State constitutions limited the power of the government and guaranteed the rights to citizens. Again, I apologize for that getting cut off back down there, but it should say guaranteed the rights to citizens. Okay, so what we see in each state is this desire to preserve the foundation of the American Revolution. We complain that Britain had gotten too powerful, so we don't want our governments over here to become too powerful because when they do, they threaten the rights of the people. Okay, so we want our state governments to be limited so that the rights of the people are protected. Okay? Now, the Continental Congress, which is the attempt of the colonies to work together, the Continental Congress decides to create a government for the entire nation. And this first national government, okay, now remember the Continental Congress was the first time we worked together. Okay, so now we've won our independence. Now we're looking at forming a national government. Our first attempt at a national government is the Articles of Confederation. Okay, so the Articles of Confederation were originally created to govern the entire nation. Okay, it sets up a two-tier government. All right, where state governments are supreme in some matters and the national government is supreme in some matters. Now, I'll be honest with you, as we go through this, what you're going to find out, the states still have most of the power. The national government is very, very weak, even though it's supposed to be supreme in some matters. We're going to find out that's not necessarily true. Okay, so the state governments are going to have most of the power, and then the national government is going to have a little power over some things. All right. Now, this division between the national government and state governments is something we call federalism. We're going to be talking about this later this week. In fact, we're going to be talking about it a lot as we move through the year. The division of power between the national government and the state governments is called federalism. So the Articles of Confederation sets up federalism, and that the state government's going to have some power, the national government's going to have some power, and to be honest with you, the state governments are going to have the most power. The national government is going to be very, very weak. But there's still that division of power. There's still that idea of federalism in this document. Okay? Now, the Articles of Confederation go into effect in 1781, the same year that we win at Yorktown. Okay, when it becomes apparent that we have won our independence and we defeated the British, we want this government to go into effect. So the Articles of Confederation go into effect in 1781. Okay. We're going to spend some time talking about how bad they are. So let's just, before we do that, let's talk about what they do and why it's kind of important that we talk about them, even though they're going to turn out to be not good. Okay. Number one, this is our first attempt at a national government. Okay. We need to recognize that it's our first attempt at a national government. It does limit the power of the national government and give most power to the states. Now that's going to cause problems later on. In saying that, I don't want you to think that the guys that came up with the Articles of Confederation were bad. They were just thinking about what they've been through with the American Revolution, how Britain's government threatened our rights, and they don't want to see that happen again. Okay, so they limit the power of the national government. They give most of the power to the states because they think the states are going to be better at protecting the people and the people's rights. Okay. It establishes a single house legislature with representation based on population of states. The big states have more power. Okay, and you can always already see there's going to be a problem with that because the big states have most of the power and the small states do not. And the small states are going to get upset. All right, so we can already begin to see there's going to be some problems down the road here. There is a weak executive branch and really no judicial branch. In fact, to be honest with you, there really is no executive branch either. It is so weak, it's almost as if it's non-existent. Okay, and the same with the judicial branch. So they're kind of there in theory, they're there in name, but they are so weak, it's almost like they don't exist at all. Okay, basically, what this is a confederation. It is a weak association of states that join together for defense and foreign relations. Okay, that's why we want a national government, is to protect us and deal with foreign relations. Other than that, all the power should be in the hands of the states. Okay, so this confederation is a weak association of states that join together for defense and foreign relations, with the states retaining most of the power. Okay, so again, we're going to basically talk about why this is wrong and how this falls apart. So I want you to realize that this is what we're dealing with here. Again, the framers are not trying to purposely set us up for failure or create something that's not good. They are just concerned about their past, about their history. Okay, we don't want to repeat the same mistakes that Britain did. And this time, if we go to war in the future, it's going to be a civil war. It's going to be us versus ourselves. Okay, so we don't want that to happen. So this is why the articles look the way that they do. Okay, now under the articles, what could the central government do? It could wage war. Okay, again, we want a national government for defense. After the war comes peace. It can make peace. Okay, again, we're dealing with defense. We're dealing with foreign relations. When you make peace, you often have to sign a treaty, so it can make treaties. All right. Again, under this idea, we want a national government to deal with foreign relations and deal with defense. Okay. It can request troops and money from the states for a national army, but it's up to the states on whether or not they want to send any. Okay. So they can request troops and money, but the states still have final say. They can coin and borrow money, okay? But it's up to the states to decide if they want to use that money or not, okay? So the national government can coin and borrow money, but the final say again rests in the hands of the states. It can set up standards for weights and measures, okay, which is very important because you want to know that a pound in Virginia is the same as a pound in Pennsylvania or New York or Massachusetts, all right? That a mile in Virginia is the same as elsewhere. So it's important that we have standards, weights, and measures in the states, okay? And it can set up a postal system, all right, which is also important because we want to be able to keep in touch with each other. All right. So these are the things that the central government could do. And to be honest with you, they're reasonable requests. Okay. We would expect a central government to be able to do that. Now, let's talk about what it cannot do. Okay. We already mentioned this. It cannot force the states to accept or abide by any of Congress's actions. So those things that we mentioned on the last screen almost become mute because they cannot force the states to do any of it. Okay, which is why I said they can request troops and money from the states for a national army, but the states don't have to send them if they don't want. They can coin money and borrow money, but the states don't have to use it. Okay, it cannot force the states to accept or abide by any of Congress's actions. What was the big issue in the American Revolution? Taxation. Well, guess what our central government cannot do? It cannot tax. Congress cannot tax the people. The states can, but the national government cannot. It cannot regulate commerce between the states. It cannot regulate trade between the states. Why? Because we don't want a central government that is too powerful. That's why it can't tax either. Okay? Even though it can coin money, there is no common currency. Why? Because they can't make the states adopt those common currencies if they want to. Okay? So the states don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. All right? And there is no executive branch and there's no judicial branch. Like I said, they're there in name. Okay? They're there in the paper and the document, but they are rendered virtually non-existent because they have so little power. Okay, so there's not going to be an executive branch. There's not going to be a judicial branch in this new central government. All right. Now, as bad as all this is, and like I said, we're going to get ready to talk about how bad the Articles of Confederation are, there are some good points. Okay. For example, we've got all this land now after the American Revolution, everything in the Mississippi River. And the government that is created under the Articles of Confederation does do a good job in dealing with that land. There are two pieces of legislation that are passed. The Land Ordinance of 1785, okay? The federal government stepped in, all this new land that we got, they survey the land, they divide it up, and they sell it to settlers at affordable prices. That's a good thing, okay? We want the government to be able to do that, and we want to expand west. So this land ordinance, which is done under the Articles of Confederation, is a good thing. Okay, we're dividing up the land, we're surveying the land, and we're selling it to people at affordable prices so they can move out there. That's good. Now, once we get people out there, how do they become states? Well, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 is going to organize that land into territories and establish procedures about how those territories are going to become states. Again, this is something good. We want this to happen because we're expanding out west. Okay, so both the Land Ordinance of 1785 and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 are good things. Okay, they're dividing up the land. They're going to divide the land up so people can buy it at affordable prices. But then we're going to take that land and we're going to divide it into territories, and we're going to put up some regulations for those territories to become states. Like you have to have so many people in those territories. You have to have set aside land for schools. You have to have written a constitution, stuff like that before you become an official state. So these are good things that are happening under Articles of Confederation. Sadly, that's about it. Okay, let's start talking about the problems with this government. Okay, number one, the national government is just too weak. Despite their desire to have the states have power, the states are going to have too much power, and there's not going to be any cooperation between them. and there's no national government to step in to kind of take things over. And I'll give you an example in just a few minutes of what we're talking about with this. Okay, so the national government is too weak, and the states have really too much power. The fact that there really aren't an executive branch and a judicial branch, that's also going to lead to problems down the road. Okay, these branches are too weak, and like I said, they're almost non-existent. All right, so no executive and no judicial branches, that's going to be a problem. Congress can't tax or regulate trade. How are you going to bring in money? Like, let's say, we want the national government to defend us. How are you going to bring in money to create an army and a navy for defense? Especially if you ask the states and the states don't send you any. Okay, so the fact that we have no power to tax and raise money for things that could benefit a bunch of people, and the fact that we don't have somebody regulating trade, and who knows what's coming in the country, who knows what's going out of the country, who knows if consumers are being treated fairly or not, the fact that we don't have somebody to regulate that, that's a problem. Okay, down the road, that's going to be a problem. All right, so these powers, the power not to tax and the power not to regulate trade and stuff like that, those are going to be problems. There's no common currency. How are we going to do business with each other? It's going to be a pain to travel from Massachusetts down to Georgia if I've got to change my currency each time I come into a new state. Okay, that's a pain. All right, so no common currency is a problem. And then, despite their best intentions about keeping people equal, and we got a one house legislature and each state gets one vote, it turns out being a problem because the big states are always going to outvote the small states, and you're going to set up inequality. Okay, so even though it's supposed to, be equal, this one vote per state in the legislature turns out to be a problem. Okay, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. Now, again, why are we having this problem in the first place? I mean, what if we've got these problems? Why was the Articles of Confederation created? It's because the framers were fearful of a powerful central government like England, and they created the Articles of Confederation to be intentionally weak as a league of friendship. Okay, unfortunately, it is too weak, and that weakness is going to cause problems down the road. Okay, now to illustrate that, let's talk about an event in 1787. Okay, 1787, a group of farmers led by Daniel Shays, okay, protest against the state. What were they upset over? They were upset over taxes. They said the state government was taxing them too much. Okay. The state calls in the state militia. The state militia clash with the protesters, and 4 of the farmers are killed. It's kind of like the Boston Massacre. Okay. The troops show up, farmers are protesting, and it's in Massachusetts, which is where Boston was. And the farmers are protesting, and the protesters and the militia clash, and 4 farmers end up getting killed. Okay. Now, Daniel Shays was a veteran from the American Revolution, and he's got a degree of respect. Okay, we're still early on here. If you fought during the American Revolution, people kind of admire you and respect you. So he's able to whip up a lot of support against the state of Massachusetts. Okay. Not only were they complaining about the taxes themselves, and they were saying we were being taxed too much, but Massachusetts had said you can only pay those taxes in gold or silver. The paper money that we issue has no value and is not to be trusted. Okay, so the tax that is levied has to be paid in gold and silver, but nobody's got any gold or silver. It's got to be paid with paper money, which is issued by the state of Massachusetts, and Massachusetts has now said it's got no value and it can't be trusted, which is why you need to pay your taxes in gold and silver. So the state is taxing us, and they're telling us what we have to pay it in, and they're telling us that the state currency can't be trusted. Okay, and that's why the rebellion broke out. All right. So not only are we being taxed, but we can't pay the taxes that Massachusetts wants us to pay. Now, who should have been able to step in? Okay. Either to make the veterans calm down, the rebels calm down, or to make the state get in line. Like, to be honest with you, somebody should have told the state, Massachusetts, hey, it's okay to have taxes, but you can't make them be paid in gold and silver, especially if you're issuing paper currency and you're going to turn around and say your paper currency is worthless. That doesn't make any sense. The national government should have been able to step in on one side or the other. Unfortunately, it is too weak to help in this situation. Okay? It can't help out either side. It can't help out the protesters by doing something about Massachusetts. It can't help out Massachusetts by doing something about the protesters. Now, eventually, the rebellion is put down and the tax is repealed. Okay? But what this has done is it has set up an unsettling precedent. Now, anytime the state does something that a group of people doesn't like, that group of people thinks it can rebel, it can revolt. Okay, so this rebellion convinces rebels to continue to rebel when the government acts against their wishes. Okay, so anytime you got a problem with the government, the state government, you can rebel, and there's nothing they can do about it. Okay, there's nobody going to get involved to put us down. All right, and when people start talking about that, people around the country are going to panic. We think there's going to be, or some people think, there's going to be a wave of chaos that just washes over all 13 states. Okay? That there's going to be this massive rebellion from Massachusetts on down, and nobody is going to be able to stop it. Because if one group can revolt for one reason, another group can revolt for another reason. Okay? And it's just going to keep going and going and going. Eventually, it's going to spiral out of control. This wave of chaos and violence that nobody is going to be able to stop. And when we start thinking in terms of that, that convinces us that we need a stronger national government. These Articles of Confederation are not working. Okay? We need something tougher. So, in 1787, James Madison of Virginia is going to call for a meeting to discuss the Articles of Confederation and discuss the problems of the Articles of Confederation. Now, this meeting is just to discuss the articles. We are not talking about getting rid of them yet. We're not talking about creating a new constitution. Nothing, okay? Madison just says we need to get together and we need to talk about these things because Shays' rebellion has shown how weak the government is. And if we want to prevent this wave of chaos and violence, we need to do something about it. So that's why he's called this meeting for 1787 to discuss these articles. And that's where we're headed next with our next lesson. This meeting is going to become known as the Constitutional Convention. And when we get to that meeting, we're going to discover we can't change the Articles of Confederation. We can't really discuss the Articles of Confederation. We need something brand new to deal with these problems. And that's where we're headed over the next couple of days.